Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, Chapter 3, The Letters from No One. Hi guys, today I want to share Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, The Letters from No One. Please like my video and subscribe my YouTube channel to get the next notifications. The escape of the Brazilian boa constrictor earned Harry his longest ever punishment by the time he was allowed out of his cupboard again. The summer holidays had started and Dudley had already broken his new video camera, crushed his remote control airplane, and first time out of his racing bike knocked down old Mrs. Fig as she crossed Privet Drive on her crutches. Harry was glad school was over, but there was no escaping Dudley's gang, who visited the house every single day. Pierce, Dennis, Malcolm, and Gordon were all big and stupid, but as Dudley was the biggest and stupidest of the lot, he was the leader. The rest of them were all quite happy to join in Dudley's favorite sport, Harry hunting. That was why Harry spent as much time as possible out of the house, wandering around and thinking about the end of the holidays, where he could see a tiny ray of hope. When September came, he could be going off to secondary school, and for the first time in his life, he would not be with Dudley. Dudley had been accepted at Uncle Vernon's old private school, Smeltings. Pierce Bookies was going to there. Harry, on the other hand, was going to Stonewall High, the local public school. Dudley thought this was very funny. They stuff people's head down the toilet the first day at Stonewall. He told Harry, "Want to come upstairs and practice?" "No thanks," said Harry. "The poor toilets never had anything as horrible as you head down it. It might be sick." Then he ran, before Dudley could work out what he had said. One day in July, Aunt Petunia took Dudley to London to buy his melting uniform, leaving Harry at Mrs. Fig's. Mrs. Fig was not as bad as usual. It turned out she had broken her leg tripping over one of her cats, and she did not seem quite fond of them as before. She let Harry watch television and gave him a bit of chocolate cake that tasted as though she had it for several years. That evening, Dudley paraded around the living room for the family in his brand new uniform. Smelting boys wore maroon tailcoats, orange knickerbockers, and flat straw hats called borders. They also carried knobbly sticks used for hitting each other while the teachers were not looking. This was supposed to be good training for later life. As he looked at Dudley in his new knickerbockers, Uncle Vernon said gruffly that it was the proudest moment of his life. Uncle Vernon, Aunt Petunia burst into tears and said she could not believe it was her equal Dudleykins. He looked so handsome and grown up. Harry did not trust himself to speak. He thought two of his ribs might already have cracked from trying not to laugh. There was a horrible smell in the kitchen the next morning when Harry went for breakfast. It seemed to be coming from a large metal cup in the sink. He went to have a look. The tub was full of what looked like dirty rats swimming in grey water. "What's this?" he asked Aunt Petunia. Her lips tightened, and they always did if he dared to ask a question. "Your new school uniform," she said. Harry looked in the bowl again. "Oh," he said, "I did not realize it had to be so wet." "Don't be stupid," snapped Aunt Petunia. "I am dyeing some of Dudley's old things grey for you. It will just like everyone else when I have finished." Harry seriously doubted this, but thought it best not to argue. He sat down at the table and tried not to think about how he was going to look on his first day at Stonewall High. Like he was wearing bits of old elephant skin, probably. Dudley and Uncle Vernon came in, both with wrinkled noses, because in the smell from had his new uniform. Uncle Vernon opened his newspaper as usual, and Dudley banged his smelting sticks, which he carried everywhere, on the table. They heard the click of the mail slot and flop of letters on the doormat. "Get the mail, Dudley," said Uncle Vernon from behind his paper. "Make Harry get it." "Get the mail, Harry." "Make Dudley get it." "Poke him with your smelting stick, Dudley." Harry Harry took the smelting stick and went to get the mail. Three things lay on the doormat: a postcard from Uncle Vernon's for Uncle Vernon's sister March, who was vacationing on the Isle of Wight, and a brown envelope that looked like a bill, and a letter for Harry. Harry picked it up and stared at it, his heart twagging like a giant elastic band. No one, even in his whole life, had written him to. Who would? He had no friends, no other relatives. He did not belong to the library, so he had never even got rude notes asking for books back. Yet, here it was, a letter addressed so plainly there could be no mistake. Mr. Harry Potter, the cupboard under the stairs, 4 Privet Drive, Little Winging, Surrey. The envelope was thick and heavy, made of yellowish parchment, and the address was written in immersed green ink. There was no stamp. Turning the envelope over, his hand trembling, Harry was a purple box, still bearing a coat of arms, a lion on an eagle, a bear, and a snake, surrounding a letter H. "Hurry up, boy!" shouted Uncle Vernon from the kitchen. "Where are you doing? Checking for lettuce bombs?" He chuckled at his own joke. Harry went back to the kitchen, still staring at the letter. He handed Uncle Vernon the bill and the postcard, sat down, and slowly began to open his yellow envelope. Uncle Vernon ripped open the bill, snorted in disgust, and flipped over the postcard. March ill, he informed Aunt Petunia. "It a funny work." "Dad," said Dudley suddenly. "Dad, Harry's gotten something." Harry was on the point of unfolding his letter, which was written on the same heavy parchment as the envelope, when it was jerked sharply out of his hand by Uncle Vernon. "That's mine," said Harry, trying to snatch it back. "Who'd be writing to me?" "Who'd be writing to you?" sneered Uncle Vernon, shaking the letter open with one hand and glancing at it. His face went from red to green, faster than a set of traffic lights, and it now stopped there. Within seconds, it was the greyish white of old porridge. "Petunio!" he gasped. Dudley tried to grab the letter to read it, but Uncle Vernon held it high out of his reach. Uncle Vernon took it curiously and read the first line. For a moment it looked as though she might faint. She chuckled her throat and made a choking noise. "Vernon? Oh my goodness, Vernon!" They stared at each other, seeming to have forgotten that Harry and Dudley were still in the room. Dudley was not used to being ignored. He gave his father a sharp tap on the head with his smelting stick. "I want to read that letter," he said loudly. "I want to read," said Harry furiously. At it's mine. As it's mine. "Get out, both of you," croaked Uncle Vernon, stuffing the letter bag. Inside its envelope, Harry did not move. "I want my letter," he shouted. "Let me see it." Damn, demanded Dudley. "Out!" roared Uncle Vernon, and he took both Harry and Dudley by the scruffs of their necks and threw them into the hall, slamming the kitchen door behind them. Harry and Dudley promptly had a furious but silent fight over who would listen at the keyhole. Dudley won, so Harry, his glasses dangling from the one ear, left Hall on his stomach to listen at the crack between door and floor. "Vernon," Aunt Petunia was saying in a quivering voice, "look at the address. How could they possibly know where he sleeps?" "You don't think they're watching the house?" "Watching? Spying? Might be following us," muttered Uncle Vernon whitely. "But what should we do, Uncle? What should we do, Vernon? Should we ride back? Tell them we don't want?" Harry could see Uncle Vernon's shiny black shoes passing up and down the kitchen. "No," he said finally. "No, we'll ignore it. If they don't get an answer, yes, that's the best. We won't do anything. But I'm not having one in the house, Petunia. Did we swear when we took him in word stamp out that dangerous nonsense?" That evening, when he got back from work, Uncle Vernon did something he had never done before. He visited Harry in his cupboard. "Where's my letter?" said Harry, the moment Uncle Vernon had squeezed through the door. "Who was writing to me?" "No one. It was addressed to you by mistake," said Uncle Vernon shortly. "I have burned it." "It was not a mistake," said Harry angrily. "It had my cupboard on it." "Silence!" yelled Uncle Vernon, and a couple of spiders fell from the ceiling. He took a few deep breaths and then forced his face into a smile, which looked quite painful. Yes, Harry, about this cupboard. Your aunt and I have been thinking you are really getting a bit big for it. We think it might be nice if you moved into Dudley's second bedroom." "Why?" said Harry. "Don't ask questions," snapped his uncle. "Take this stuff upstairs now." The Dursleys' house had 4 bedrooms, one for Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia, one for visitors, usually Uncle Vernon's sister March, one where Dudley slept, and one where Dudley kept all the toys and things that would not fit into his first bedroom. It only took Harry one trip upstairs to move everything he wanted from the cupboard to his room. He sat down on the bed and stared around him. Nearly everything in here was broken. The month-old video camera was lying on the top of a small working tank Dudley had that once driven over the next door neighbor's dog. In the corner was Dudley's first ever television set, which he had put on his foot through when the favorite program had been cancelled. There was a large birdcage which had once had a parrot that Dudley had swept at school for a real air rifle, which was up on a shelf with the end all bent because Dudley had sat on it. Other slaves, other sleeves were full of books. They were the only things in the room that looked as though they had never been touched. From downstairs came the sound of Dudley blowing at his mother. I don't want him in there. I need the room. Make him get out. Harry sighed and stretched out on the bed. Yesterday he had been given anything to be up here. Today he had rather be back in his cupboard with that letter than up here without it. Next morning at breakfast, everything was rather quiet. Dudley was in shock. He would scream, whacked his father with his felt stick, been sick on purpose, kicked his mother, and thrown his tortoise through the greenhouse roof, and he still did not have his room back. Harry was thinking about this time yesterday and bitterly wishing he had opened the letter in the hall. Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia kept looking at each other darkly. When the mail arrived, Uncle Vernon, who seemed to be trying to be nice to Harry, made Dudley go and get it. They heard him banging things with his smelting stick all the way down the hall. Then he shouted, "There's another one! Mr. H. Potter, the smallest bedroom, 4 Privet Drive." With a strangled cry, Uncle Vernon leaped from his seat and ran down the hall. Harry, right behind him, Uncle Vernon had to wrestle Dudley to the ground to get the letter from him, which was made difficult by the fact that Harry had grabbed Uncle Vernon around the neck from behind. After a minute of confusing fighting, in which everyone got hit lot by smelling stick, Uncle Vernon straightened up, gasping for breath, with Harry's letter clutched in his hand. "Go to your cupboard, I mean your bedroom." He wheezed at Harry. "Darling, go, just go." Harry walked round and round his new room. Someone knew he had moved out of his cupboard, and they seemed to know he had not received his first letter. Surely that meant they had tried again. And this time he had made sure that they did not fail. He had a plan. The repaired alarm clock rang at 6 o'clock the next morning. Harry turned it off quickly and dressed silently. He must not wake the Dursleys. He stole downstairs without turning on any of the lights. He was going to wait for the postman on the corner of Rivet Drive and get the letters from number 4 first. His heart hammed as he crept across the dark hall toward the front door. Harry leaped into the air. He had not trodden on something big and squazzy on the doormat. Something alive? Lights clicked on upstairs, and to his horror, Harry realized that the big squazzy something had been his Uncle Vernon's face. Uncle Vernon had been lying at the foot of the front door in a sleeping bag, clearly making sure that Harry did not do exactly what he had been trying to do. He shouted at Harry for about half an hour, and then and then I want," he began, but Uncle Vernon was tearing the letters into pieces before his eyes. Uncle Vernon did not go to work that day. He stayed at home and nailed up the mail slot. "See," he explained to Aunt Petunia through a mouthful of nails. "If they cannot deliver them, they will just give up. I am not sure that will work, Vernon." "Oh, these people minds work in strange ways, Petunia. They are not like you and me," said Uncle Vernon, trying to knock in a mail without the piece of fruit cake Aunt Petunia had just brought him. On Friday, no less than 12 letters arrived for Harry. As there could not go through the mail slot, they had been pushed under the door, slotted through the sides, and a few even forced through the small window in the downstairs bathroom. Uncle Vernon stayed at home again. After burning all the letters, he got out a hammer and a nail and boarded up the cracks around the front and the back doors so no one could go out. He hummed, tiptoed through the tulips as he worked, and chipped at small noises. On Saturday, things began to get out of hand. 24 letters to Harry found their way into the house, rolled up and hidden inside each of the 2 dozen eggs that their very confused milkman had handed Aunt Petunia through the living room window, while Uncle Vernon made furious telephone calls to post office and the dairy, trying to find someone to complain to. Aunt Petunia shredded the letter in her food processor. "Who on earth want to talk to you this badly?" Dudley asked Harry in amazement. On Sunday morning, Uncle Vernon sat down at the breakfast table looking tried and rather ill, but happy. No post on Sunday, he reminded them cheerfully as he spread marmalade on his newspapers. "No damn letters today." Something came whizzing down the kitchen chimney as he spoke and caught him sharply on the back of his head. Next moment, 30 or 40 letters came pelting out of his fireplace like bullets. The Dursleys duckled, but Harry leaped into the air trying to catch one. "Out! Out!" Uncle Vernon seized Harry around the waist and threw him into the hall. But when Aunt Petunia and Dudley had run out with their arms over his face, Uncle Vernon slammed the door shut. They could hear the letters still streaming into the room, bouncing off the wall and floor. "That does it," said Uncle Vernon, trying to speak calmly but pulling great tufts out of his moustache at the time. "I want you all back here in 5 minutes, ready to leave. We are going away. Just pack some clothes, no arguments." He looked so dangerous with half his moustache missing that no one dared argue. Then, minutes later, they had went their way through the boarded up doors and were in the car speeding towards the highway. Dudley was sniffing in the back seat. His father had hit him around the head for holding them up while he tried to pack his television, VCR, and computer in his sports bag. They drove, and they drove. Even Aunt Petunia did not dare ask where they were going. Every now and then, Uncle Vernon would take a sharp turn and drive in the opposite direction of a while. Shake 'em off, shake 'em off, shake them off, shake them off, he would mutter whenever he did this. They did not stop to eat or drink all day. By nightfall, Dudley was howling. He'd never had such a bad day in his life. He was hungry. He missed 5 television programs he wanted to see, and he had never gone to so long without bowling up an alien on his computer. Uncle Vernon stopped at last outside a gloomy-looking hotel on the outskirts of a big city. Dudley and Harry shared a room with twin beds and damp mustard sheets. Dudley snored, but Harry stayed awake, sitting on the window sill, staring down at the lights of passing cars and wondering. They ate stale cornflakes and cold tinned tomatoes on toast for breakfast the next day. They had just finished when the owner of the hotel came over to their table. Shumi, but is one of you Mr. H. Potter? Only I got about 100 of these at the front desk. She held up a letter so they could read the green ink address. Mr. H. Potter, room 17, Railview Hotel, Cookworth. Harry made a grab for the letter, but Uncle Vernon knocked his hand out of the way. The old man stared. I will take them, said Uncle Vernon, standing up quickly and following her from the dining room. Would not it be best to go home, dear? Aunt Petunia suggested timidly, hours later. But Uncle Vernon did not seem to hear her. Exactly what he was looking for, none of them knew. He drove them into the middle of a forest, got out, looked around, shook his head, got back in the car, and off them went again. The same thing happened in the middle of a port field, halfway across a suspension bridge, and at the top of a multi-level parking garage. Daddy's gone mad. He has not he? Dudley asked Aunt Petunia. Dudley's late that afternoon. Uncle Vernon had parked at the coast, locked them all inside the car, and disappeared. It started to rain. Great drops beat on the roof of the car. Dudley said, It's morning. It's Monday. He told me the great Humberto on tonight. I want to stay somewhere with a television. Monday? Remember Harry of something. If it was Monday, and you could usually count on Dudley to know the days of the week because of the television, then tomorrow, Tuesday, was Harry's 11th birthday. Of course, his birthdays were never exactly fun. Last year, the Dursleys had given him a coat hanged and a pair of Uncle Vernon's old socks. Still, you were not 11 every day. Uncle Vernon was back and he was smiling. He was also carrying a long thin package and did not answer Aunt Petunia when she asked what did he want. Found the perfect place, he said. Come on, everyone out. It was very cold outside the car. Uncle Vernon was pointing at what looked like a large rock away off the sea. Perched on the top of the rock was the almost miserable little sack you could imagine. One thing was certain, there was no television in there. Storm forecast for tonight, said Uncle Vernon gleefully, clapping his hands together, and this gentleman kindly agreed to lend us this boat. A toothless old man came tumbling up to them, pointing with a rather wicked grin at an old rowboat robbing in the iron grey water below them. I have already got us some rations, said Uncle Vernon. So all abroad. It was freezing in the boat. Icy spray and rain crept down their knees, and a chicken wind whipped their faces. After that, afterward, seemed like 4 hours, they reached the dock, where Uncle Vernon, sleeping and siding, led the way to the broken down windows. The inside was horrible. It smelled strongly of seaweed, the wind whistling and through the gaps in the window wooden walls. And the fireplace was damp and empty. There were only 2 rooms. Uncle Vernon's rations turned out to be a bag of chips each and 4 bananas. He tried to start a fire, but the empty chip bags just moved and sifted up. Could do with some of those letters now, he said cheerfully. He was in a very good mood. Obviously, he thought nobody stood a chance of reaching them here in a storm to deliver mail. Harry privately agreed, though the thought did not cheer him up at all. As night fell, he promised the storm blew around them. Spray from the high waves splattered the walls of the hut, and a fierce wind rattled the 50 windows. And Petunia found a few moldy blankets in the second room and made up a bed for Dudley on the moth-eaten sofa. She and Uncle Vernon went off to the lumpy bed next room, and Harry was left to find the softest bit of floor he could and curl up under the thinnest, most ragged blanket. The storm raged more and more ferociously as the night went on. Harry could not sleep. He shivered and turned over, trying to get comfortable, his stomach rumbling with hunger. Dudley's nose were down by the low watch, which was dangling over the edge of the sofa. On his first visit, told Harry he had been 11 in 10 minutes' time. He lay and watched his birthday tick nearer, wondering if the Dursleys were remembered at all, wondering where the later return was now. 5 minutes to go. Harry heard something crack outside. He hoped the roof was not going to fall in, although he might be warmer if it did. 4 minutes to go. Maybe the house in Privet Drive would be so full of letters when they got back that they would be able to steal one somehow. 3 minutes to go. Was the sea slapping hard on the rock like that? And 2 minutes to go. What was the funny crunching noise? Was the rock crumbling into the sea? 1 minute to go, and he had been 11. 30 seconds. 20, 10, 9. Maybe he had wake Dudley just to annoy him. 3, 2, 1, boom! The whole sack shivered, and Harry's head rolled upright, staring at the door. Someone was outside knocking to come in. Thank you. I have finished for today. Next day I will share Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone chapter 4. Thank you. And please like my video and subscribe my YouTube channel and hit the bell icon to get the next notification. Thank you.